All right, a Fox 35 News exclusive. 9-year-old Jameria Simmons was found dead back in June in Montverde. Fox 35 News first brought you the story then as deputies were trying to figure out how she died. And tonight, they say they have some tragic answers.
Deputies say this woman beat the little girl and instructed her dog to attack her.
You're the only person arrested, so we kind of want to hear your story. We think that there's more people involved in this that should be sitting in the chair you're sitting with too. So I want to hear from you. What happened?
She called her a bonus daughter on social media, posted birthday wishes with heart emojis. But the security cameras told a different story, one where this same woman directed her 100-pound Rottweiler to maul 9-year-old Jameria to death. Tyshawn Martin, 34 years old, 3 felony charges hanging over her head right now: first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and child neglect. The victim? A little girl who trusted her. A little girl whose own home security system would become the key witness against the woman who was supposed to protect her. You're probably wondering how we get from heart emojis to homicide charges. How someone goes from celebrating a child's birthday online to allegedly saying, "I'm fixing to kill her," while holding a dog's leash. Well, buckle up. This case will show you just how deadly the gap between social media fantasy and real life can become. 9-year-old Jameria Simmons should have been starting 4th grade. Instead, first responders found her inside her Montverde, Florida home on a June evening, naked, unresponsive, and already cold to the touch. The bruises, cuts, burns, and bite marks covering her small body told a story that nobody wanted to hear. But here's what makes this even more heartbreaking. Jameria had already lost her mother to leukemia. Think about that for a second. This little girl had already watched cancer steal away the one person who should have been her safe harbor. Instead of finding comfort and protection, she found herself caught in an adult world filled with dysfunction, custody battles, and ultimately, violence. Her maternal grandmother had been fighting tooth and nail to get custody of Jameria and her 5-year-old sister. She knew something wasn't right. Grandmothers usually do, don't they? They have that instinct when it comes to their grandchildren. But the system had other plans. Jameria's father, Simmons, had picked up both girls from school one day without consent. Just like that, they disappeared from their grandmother's home and never returned. Now you might be asking yourself, where was this father when his daughter needed him most? Great question. The night Jameria died, was nowhere to be found. He had flown to California, leaving his daughter in the hands of his girlfriend. That girlfriend was Tyshawn Martin, and if you scrolled through her social media, you'd think she was Mother of the Year. Photo after photo of their blended family. Jameria's who Martin often called Mary Mice smiling in pictures. Posts about how much she loved her bonus daughter, heart emojis everywhere. Before we get too deep, hit the like button, share your take in the comments, and tap subscribe with the bell so you never miss the next episode of Deranged Women. In January, Martin had posted a birthday tribute, May 9th, be great to her, with that familiar heart emoji. The same woman who would later be caught on camera directing a Rottweiler to attack this very same child. Makes you wonder about those smiling photos, doesn't it? What was really happening when the cameras stopped rolling? Because here's the thing about social media, it's a highlight reel. People post what they want you to see. They craft this perfect image while the reality behind closed doors can be completely different. And in this case, that difference cost a little girl her life. Now you're probably thinking this came out of nowhere, that maybe it was just one bad night, one moment where things went too far. But that's not how these stories usually unfold, is it? Text messages would later reveal that Jameria was regularly punished with what they called physical exercise. Wall sits that went on far too long, running in place with her arms raised until her little body couldn't take it anymore. But it didn't stop there. She was hit with various objects, kicked, punched, pinched. Can you imagine being 9 years old and living in constant fear of when the next punishment was coming? When the next excuse would arise for someone to hurt you? This wasn't discipline, this was systematic abuse of a child who had already lost everything. The investigation would uncover that this pattern had been going on for months. Think about that timeline. Jameria's mother died from leukemia. The little girl, already grieving and traumatized, gets taken from her grandmother's home, She's placed in an environment where the woman posting loving messages about her online is actually subjecting her to regular physical abuse. But here's what really gets me about this case. Martin wasn't just abusing Jameria, she was documenting her own life online like nothing was wrong. Posting about family dinners, sharing photos of their Rottweiler, talking about how blessed she felt to have these children in her life. Meanwhile, that same dog was being trained for something far more disturbing. You see, this wasn't Martin's first encounter with animal control issues. Back in 2016, she had been charged with failure to control an animal resulting in a bite. That case got dismissed, but now we have to ask ourselves, was this a warning sign that everyone missed? Was this dog already showing aggressive tendencies years before it would be used as a weapon against a child? And where was Luen during all of this? Court records show he had his own legal troubles. 3 years in prison on drug charges, an outstanding warrant for allegedly violating his probation. This is the man who was supposed to be protecting his daughter. Instead, he left her with someone who would ultimately take her life. The custody battle with Jameria's grandmother suddenly makes more sense now, doesn't it? She wasn't just fighting for legal custody, she was fighting to save her granddaughter's life. She could see what others couldn't or wouldn't see. But sometimes, even when people speak up, even when they fight the system, it's already too late. By June 15th, everything was building to a breaking point. Jameria was trapped in a home with someone who resented her existence. Her father was gone. Her grandmother was fighting a legal battle she was losing. And Martin was about to show just how far her hatred could go. The security cameras in that Montverde home were about to capture something that would shock even seasoned law enforcement officers. Something that would prove once and for all that the smiling photos and heart emojis were nothing more than a carefully constructed lie. June 15th, 2 days before anyone would call 911, 2 days before first responders would find Jameria's lifeless body. But those security cameras, they were rolling the entire time. When Lake County deputies finally got their hands on that home security footage, what they saw left even veteran investigators shaken. These are people who've seen the worst of humanity, who've worked cases that would give most of us nightmares. But this footage, this was something else entirely. The video shows Tyshawn Martin standing in that room with her 100-pound Rottweiler. Not just standing there, she's holding the dog's leash, she's in complete control of what's about to happen. And 9-year-old Jameria? She's right there in the frame, probably having no idea that the woman who calls her bonus daughter online is about to turn a family pet into a weapon. Martin directs the dog toward Jameria, commands it. The massive Rottweiler, trained to obey its owner, follows those directions. What happens next is exactly what Martin intended to happen. The dog attacks the little girl while Martin maintains control through that leash. She's not trying to stop it. She's not pulling the dog away. She's watching it happen. But the attack itself wasn't enough for Martin. While the dog is mauling this child, Martin starts kicking Jameria repeatedly. A 9-year-old girl is being torn apart by a massive dog, and this woman decides she needs to inflict even more pain. According to investigators who analyzed the audio, Martin can be heard saying, "I'm fixing to kill her," not in the heat of passion, not as some empty threat during an argument. She said this while methodically torturing a child to death. When you really break down what happened in that room, the calculation becomes clear. Martin waited until Luan was out of state. She had Jameria alone with no witnesses except for the security cameras that she probably forgot were recording. The medical examiner would later determine that Jameria died from complications of multiple blunt injuries to her head, body, and extremities. Burns on her right foot showed this torture had multiple elements, but what the autopsy couldn't capture was the terror that little girl must have felt. The confusion of being attacked by an animal she probably thought was part of her family, commanded by a woman she was supposed to trust. June 17th arrives. Someone finally calls 911. First responders rush to that Montverde home expecting to save a life, but Jameria is already gone. Her aunts arrive to find their niece cold to the touch. The little girl who should have been playing, learning, growing up, has been reduced to evidence in a homicide investigation. The paramedics and deputies who responded that day probably had no idea what they were walking into. They're thinking possible accident, maybe a dog attack that went wrong, perhaps some kind of medical emergency. They have no clue that they're looking at the result of a calculated murder carried out over the course of hours by someone who was supposed to love this child. Martin maintains her story. She tells investigators that the family was supposed to meet up with Luann in California. Lake County Sheriff's investigators start treating this as a child abuse case, but they know something doesn't add up. The injuries are too severe, too systematic. The story doesn't match what they're seeing. So they get a warrant for that home security system, probably expecting to find some evidence of neglect, or maybe an argument that got out of hand. Instead, they find a horror movie. They find footage of a woman systematically torturing a child to death, while that child's father is 3,000 miles away. They find evidence of premeditation, of intent, of a level of cruelty that defies explanation. The investigation that started as possible child abuse becomes a first-degree murder case. Martin goes from grieving stepmother to prime suspect in the span of watching that video footage. First-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, child neglect, 3 felony charges that carry the possibility of life in prison or even death. All because Tyshawn Martin decided that her bonus daughter deserved to die, and she was going to make sure it happened in the most brutal way possible. Lake County Sheriff's investigators knew they had something explosive on their hands. Video evidence of a murder is rare enough, but video evidence of a woman using her dog to kill a child, that footage was going to change everything about this case. But building a murder case takes more than just shocking video. Detectives started pulling apart every piece of Tyshawn Martin's life, and what they found painted a disturbing picture of someone who had been hiding her true nature for years. Martin's criminal record stretched back over a decade. Shoplifting charges, driving without a license, not having a child properly secured in a car seat. Small infractions that might seem meaningless on their own, but together they showed a pattern of someone who didn't follow rules, didn't respect authority, and didn't prioritize child safety. Then came the detail that made investigators' blood run cold. In 2016, Martin had been charged with failure to control an animal resulting in a bite. The case got dismissed, but now that charge took on a whole new meaning. Her Rottweiler had attacked someone before. She'd lost control of this dog before, and somehow walked away without consequences. Was that 2016 incident a preview of what happened to Jameria? Had Martin been testing her dog's aggression for years, learning exactly how to weaponize that 100-pound animal? The investigators were starting to think so. They dove deeper into the text messages and digital evidence from Martin's phone. What they uncovered was a systematic pattern of abuse that went far beyond what that security video showed. Jameria had been living in hell for months before Martin finally decided to kill her. The exercise punishments weren't random bursts of anger. They were calculated torture sessions designed to break down a 9-year-old girl physically and mentally. Wall sits that lasted until Jameria collapsed. Forced running with arms raised until her little body gave out. Being hit with objects, kicked, punched, pinched, all documented in Martin's own communications. This woman had been keeping track of her abuse like it was some kind of training program. She knew exactly what she was doing to this child, and she was escalating the violence systematically. The attack with the dog wasn't a sudden snap, it was the final step in a months-long plan to destroy Jameria. Meanwhile, investigators were trying to piece together where Jameria Simmons fit into all of this. The father who had fought his own mother-in-law for custody, who had taken his daughters from their grandmother's home without permission, wasn't even in the state when his daughter was murdered. Jameria had his own legal troubles brewing. An outstanding warrant from another Florida county meant he was headed back to prison regardless of what happened with Jameria's case. He'd already spent 3 years behind bars on drug charges, and now he was wanted for allegedly violating his probation. The question that haunted investigators was simple: did Jameria know what Martin was doing to his daughter? Had he seen the bruises, the fear, the signs that his girlfriend was systematically abusing Jameria? Or was he so wrapped up in his own criminal activities that he missed what was happening right under his nose? Text messages between Martin and Jameria would provide some answers, but they also raised more disturbing questions. Social services had been overwhelmed, understaffed, dealing with too many cases and not enough resources. Another child fell through the cracks, and this time it cost a little girl her life. The grandmother's instincts had been right all along, but in a system that prioritizes biological fathers over protective grandmothers, her voice wasn't heard until Jameria was already dead. The Lake County Sheriff's Office called this one of the worst child abuse cases they'd seen in decades. These are investigators who deal with horrific crimes regularly, but something about Martin's calculated cruelty, her use of social media to hide her true nature, and the systematic way she tortured Jameria before killing her struck them as uniquely evil. When they finally arrested Tyshawn Martin, she still tried to maintain her innocence. Even with video evidence of her directing a dog to kill a 9-year-old girl, she couldn't admit what she'd done. The woman who had posted heart emojis about her bonus daughter was now facing first-degree murder charges. At her initial court appearance, Martin's only concern seemed to be securing a private attorney. When the judge asked about representation, she confirmed she already had a lawyer lined up. No remorse for Jameria, no explanation for her actions. Just legal maneuvering to try to escape consequences for cold-blooded murder. The judge denied bond immediately. With charges this serious, with video evidence this damning, Martin wasn't going anywhere except a jail cell while she waited for her day in court. Jameria Simmons should be in middle school right now. She should be complaining about homework, arguing with friends, discovering who she wants to become. Instead, she's another name on a list of children failed by adults who were supposed to protect them. Her case exposed the deadly gap between social media facades and reality. It showed how someone can build an entire false identity online while committing unthinkable acts in private. Most importantly, it proved that when the system fails to listen to people like Jameria's grandmother, people who see the warning signs and speak up, Nebel's children die. Tyshawn Martin turned a family pet into a murder weapon and documented her own crime on security cameras. She lived a lie so convincing that even after killing a child, she thought she could keep playing the role of the grieving stepmother. She was wrong, dead wrong. And now a little girl who lost her mother to cancer and her life to calculated cruelty has become a reminder that evil doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it looks like a woman posting heart emojis while planning murder. Remember, danger can wear a friendly face. Stay aware, look out for others, and reach out if you need help. See you in the next case on Deranged Women. Thanks for watching.